Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody back. We're very excited to have with us Dr. Kevin Williams today. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us. We appreciate it.
Happy to do so.
Um, a lot of people haven't had a chance to meet you or know you, but I think it's important that they do. You're actually a co-author of the EIPA.
I am.
So you've been right with it right from the very start. And we were hoping you could share with us how the EIPA actually came into existence and how it's changed from what it was originally when it was developed until now. Could you share that with us?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Actually, this goes back quite a ways. When Dr. Brenda Schick and I worked together at Boys Town Research Hospital, we received a phone call from Lori Bolster in Colorado asking if we had some type of a tool to assess educational interpreters. And she contacted Boys Town because the research hospital is fairly famous for doing diagnostic work with deaf kids. And
Right.
So we had kind of roughed up an idea of such a tool, and Brenda flew out to the Denver area and met with the cohort there and flew back and basically said, guess what? Next week you're going out to pilot this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was like, I don't think I have ever been more afraid in my entire life.
I can
And
imagine.
knowing I was going to face an audience of potentially 30, 15 deaf and 15 hearing people to present a tool that was still basically in prototype form. But they were incredibly gracious, and we worked like the Dickens and really got things hammered down quite nicely. So all the domains got finalized with the collective effort, brought them back, and Dr. Schick and I looked through them, and we're satisfied with the balance of the tool because we thought that that was incredibly important. Both of us were very much aware of the fact that current assessment models were basically giving people pass-fail metrics and nothing more. They weren't giving any form of diagnostic feedback. And excuse me again, given the state of our field and the state of education of interpreters, we just felt it really very, very important that they have something substantive that, maybe there would be a mentoring program. We didn't want just a thank you for playing kind of a response. So the early EIPA began to develop, and several states worked with us. Kansas was one, Iowa was one, Nebraska, Wisconsin, and we worked in Pennsylvania doing what we called live assessment. So we would fly out and train groups of evaluators, much like the early RID tests here in the United States, where we would go in and we would train panels and teach them how to utilize this tool. And that worked fairly well for quite a while. But then states were more like, well, we want something a bit more standardized. We need something that's a little bit less volatile, meaning if the sample wasn't as robust as interpreter A's sample wasn't as robust as interpreter's B, what was the impact? What was the effect of that? So we then began to develop what we call the stimuli-driven version, which is what we have currently today. So I spent considerable amount of time with our videographer at Boys Town going into public schools and actually capturing classroom samples. And we also traveled and interviewed a gazillion deaf kids so that we had actual deaf youngsters that were part of the sign language to spoken English component of the test. And we really also theoretically felt very strongly that what I still call elementary K through 6, that setting and the 7 through 12 setting, the secondary setting, are very different. Here, at least stateside, they are in their approach. In that, you've heard the phrase, you learn to read read to learn. And that's, I think, pretty indicative of K-6. You learn the tools of education, and then in more the upper settings of public education, you learn to apply and discern, and you begin to stylize those tools till at the very end, you begin to have kind of that pre-college experience where you really begin, I like chemistry a lot. I'm really interested in physics. I'm really interested in whatever. So you begin to really, excuse me, pack your academic portfolio and get ready to go into the college setting. So we wanted a test that was reflective of those different, really two different flavors, if you will, of education. So, you know, what were the goals of early education and what were the goals of later public education? And people would come to us and say, well, that means that the K-6 test is easier, correct? And we're like, no, not at all. Not at all. In fact, in my mind, honestly, I think that early elementary test is even more difficult because of the changes in register, because of the language that's used. There's a lot of redundancy. It is far more explicit in its direction, where there's much more implicature as you move up through the grade levels. And so we began, again, we made the shift to using the stimuli-driven version, and we're now on this third iteration, I believe it is, of that video-driven material. So the test has, don't hold me to this because I may be off some, but I know for a fact that we have the richest database related to interpreting of any form in the world. So I believe that we are well past 17,000 candidates of going through assessment. And we work now online together. The research hospital still has the EIPA headquartered there, but with COVID and what's happening, everyone's working remotely. So we basically are able to upload things to the cloud, download things. LTAs have been phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal in keeping this thing rolling along. So yeah, that's it.
There's really nothing like it. I mean, it's really the highest quality, and it really helps. The EIPA really helps interpreters to develop their skills. It isn't just an assessment, like you said. They can take what they get from that and they can continue growing pretty much at any level. They can continue growing and developing in the field. So it's fantastic. Of course, I'm biased, but
we're kicking around the idea, and I'm afraid even to put this out there, but I will anyway, because sometimes when you do, good things happen. I really am hoping that through NTID and RIT, we can set up kind of a regional type program where we have groups of interpreters that come into the RIT NTID campus for like a week, and we do training on theory and models and those kinds of things. And then they go back, and then we recycle across the United States. They bring groups in and they do a face-to-face. We train them, they go home. And then starting in the fall, going the rest of the year, we would do much like there's a program called the Certification in Healthcare Interpreting, or we just call it CHI, through NTID and RIT. And it's going to be kind of a sister program, we hope, to that, in that interpreters can join these cohorts and study together, again, collectively in their early elementary or their upper elementary pods of people, and really continue to focus on skill development.
well, that's exciting. I hope it does come to fruition. So we'll have to watch for that. So now I understand that you're still obviously working as a consultant with the EIPA, still evaluating exams. I know that because we had the opportunity to work together. But I also know, that you continue to contribute to our field in other areas. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now? Like your work at...
I'll back up, not to cry in my coffee. But, several years ago, I started having some fairly chronic headaches, and it was really impacting me on a lot of different levels. And I went through a series of diagnostic tests and found a very deep-seated tumor in the middle of my brain.
Oh, I'm so
And so that was extracted. And then just because I didn't have anything else better to do, I went and had a stroke. So
no.
it's been a really long, it's been a very, very long road back to recovery. You can still hear it, excuse me, in my voice some.
How long ago did that happen? I didn't realize.
It happened now, in March of this year, my surgery will have been at the 2-year point. So
Wow.
it's been, thank God for good pharmacology. I finally feel like I can find my skivvies in the morning and I can leave and come back and get home, and everything's is well. So my degree of really professional work has been curtailed for the moment.
Of course.
On disability from the university, so I'm not.
I
I'm
see.
no longer teaching there. I'm still considered faculty, but I'm on disability leave.
I see.
But I do a lot of work, just one-on-one consulting, where interpreters somehow find me on the internet and, can you watch this work for me? And what do you think about? And I'm blessed to have had well over a decade of teaching in the ASLIE department at NTID. So I've had the real blessing of knowing scads of interpreters. In fact, right after my surgery, I awoke to find the then senior class in cap and gown around my bed in the hospital. Yes, that was exactly, yeah, that was, it still blows me away. But, it's interpreters. It's who we are. It's why we do what we do. We have this incredible human connection. And if that's not there, then we should all be just stenographers or something, It's just very different.
Wow.
So my professional contributions have changed. I still am very determined now, especially that the cloud is lifting and I'm thinking more clearly. I talked with you briefly about the regional concept of interpreting, but I want to author a textbook related to educational interpreting and working in public schools. So I still think we have things very back assward in a sense, and that we talk about the interpreters really interpreting for the deaf child, but that's totally incorrect. They're really interpreting for the educator. And when we don't have that mindset, we actually step the child away from instruction in the classroom. Of course, I'm providing interpreting services from the educator to the deaf student and vice versa. But the last thing I want them is to say, I'm Sammy's interpreter. I'm not Sammy's, I'm Mr. Swanson's interpreter. And I'll be your interpreter when you need it. Okay. So in a sense, just having that change, if you will, in philosophy, I think evens out the playing field a little bit for that kid. I don't want them hiding behind me as the interpreter. I don't want them to be passed over because of me. Right. If they're in that classroom on an IEP, everybody has kind of a membership responsibility to co-educate.
Right. That's a different lens than what traditionally I think interpreters are looking through, and so much better. I think in the end, the results are so much better. So I do hope you finish that book, because it's something we need.
There have been many, many people who have impacted my life in relationship to that. And I'm grateful to Dr. Schick and many of the people that I've been blessed to know that really kind of have sculpted my thinking related to thinking, related to child development, related to translation or interpretation work. It's a cool field. I love it.
Yeah, truly. I agree. So this is the part that I think many of our viewers are very excited and have been waiting to have you talk a little bit about, and that's the top-down processing. It's a skill that when it's really been developed in interpreter, our work improves so dramatically. So I have a diagram I'd like to share with folks that you developed, and I'm going to screen share it right now. If you could tell us a little bit about this would be fabulous and a real help to the folks watching. So here it is. Are you able to see it?
I'm seeing it great. Gail, I remember when this kind of crystallized in my head. It was just one of those moments where you go, wow, there it is. And why, I mean, I love it because it's portable. I can use it to show people this. And why I really like it, the more and this is no pun intended, the more I think about it, this is how cognition works.
Mm-hmm.
That when we develop language, let me back that up. When we acquire a language acquisition follows this process. Now, why that's important is so many of the deaf kids we work with haven't acquired a language, they're learning a language, which is a very, very different process. And that, frankly, they're learning it at a later age. And frankly, they may be trying to stamp out, I agree with cognitive scientists who talk about the fact that the brain eradicates information. Once there's a footprint in there, it's there. Now, and I can honestly tell you, this is not a boo-hoo-hoo in my beer. Now, as my own brain reconnects to areas, I'll have like a, oh my gosh, like I'm revisiting this idea again, not for the first time, but it's like, where was this? Yeah, there it is. And so like these aha moments are incredible. So back to the model itself. When a typical child is born, they're surrounded by a context, a setting. They start watching for rhythmic patterns, behaviors that become predictable for them. And if you don't believe that, ask a parent about taking a child out of a given setting. Like now in the holidays, if a kid like is at home a lot and then they take the kid out to somewhere else, 9 out of 10 times the child acts up because the setting is different. Everything's changed. Their ability at the pragmatic functional level to predict is not what it was. And when they're back in the normal setting, they settle back down again. Mm-hmm. So kids develop the sense of pragmatics. They watch things happen. They also begin hearing babies listen to how people are talking. And so all of a sudden you have babies start what we call babbling. Well, all that stuff, and no, I'm sorry, I'm 62 and I can still do that. All of that stuff is basically replicating what's happening in the setting. Mm-hmm. So they're listening to the intonation. They don't have command, but they know what's going on. And when a kid acts up and starts crying, they start having crying patterns. And women are far better than men in relationships at discerning what the cry means. The guys generally go, the baby's crying, and the wife goes, she's hungry, he's wet, he's just crying, he didn't go down for, So what babies realize is that if I cry in a certain manner, I will get a certain response to that cry. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So they stylize that. They don't have language yet, but they begin to stylize, and they realize when they do something, there's a response. Now that's really, 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 really important, because it means that's when the baby realizes, I'm not alone. I'm here. I'm part of this. And when I do this, you'll do that. So this is the onset, if you will, of socialization. We know that in situations where infants are, I don't like this term, but it's true, warehoused in kind of orphanage situations where there are multiple infants. If the child cries and there's no response, the amount of crying begins to decrease. And then you see the child detaching. And that's why, you hear stories of people adopting kids from some of these situations where there are horrific bonding issues with that child as they mature. Well, it didn't just happen, and it's not the child's fault. It's the organism's response to not having a sense of pragmatic engagement with somebody, right?
Mhm.
So over time, then we know that kids start babbling. Deaf kids do this as well, and they do this kind of babbling too. Well, and what happens is that, parents then respond. So this is like, bah, 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 bah. Oh, you're hungry. You want more juice? And they begin feeding until sooner or later the kid cracks the language code, the lexical level, and they'll say things like, ma, ma, oh, you want more what? More milk? Oh, mom, he said, mom, pa, 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 so all of a sudden, and once that child starts off at this level and moves forward, it's like the 4th of July. Those parents are like, oh, they said, oh, look, this, and parents write down the first words and they keep books and all those kinds of things. Well, that's like throwing gasoline on a fire. The kid's now like, I am the center of the universe. This is great. I'm going to start picking up this language, da, 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 da. And then it just, it explodes. So by the time the kid gets to be about 2.5, they can have some pretty robust vocabularies. And not only do they have good vocabularies, they can play. They create their friends. They create, this is my truck, and oh, beep, 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 let me through. So they do all kinds of language play kinds of activities. But back to this model, it's all basically this kind of top-down notion of knowing, okay, this is why this is going to happen. This is how, so it's like the truck. Hey, you need to open the gate. Why? I want to come through. So the kid knows how to kind of copy some of those command tones in a play situation. And why, again, back to this is really, really important that, back to that goofy example, you need to open the gate. Well, what do they want? The kid wants his car to go across the bridge or go into somewhere, all right? So he knows, all right, I need to say this in a certain way. You can't say, will you please open the gate? It's like, no, I need for you to open the, so they frame their language, if you will, in a manner that gets done what they want to have done. So what we know is that you and I, as fluent speakers of English and hopefully fluent speakers of ASL, can think in this top-down manner. We can think about, this is what I want to say, this is how I want to say it, and this is what I'm going to say. Now, there are all these other kinds of fancy words, and the other words are related to some of the models that we use in training at NTID. So pragmatics is the context or the function, the action related to the language, how it's supposed to behave in that kind of a situation. Prosody basically is affect, rhythm, rate, stress patterns, intonation. It's the how that we happen. And then the lexical level is the what, that it's the words, it's the stuff that is the foundation. So if I wanted to give a simple example of this, I could say something along the lines of, and I've used this in other talks, so I'll try to refer back to it. If you and I were in a relationship and I said to you, honey, we need to talk.
Yeah, that has a lot more to it.
Oh yeah, then you're instantly thinking, OMG, what did I do now? And if I'm like evil, and I am, if I'm evil and you say, what do you want to talk about, Gab? And I'm say, I'll tell you when I get home.
Oh, that's the worst.
That's the worst. And immediately you begin you run all these scenarios. Why? And you start, why he wants to talk is, I bet he saw the scratch on the side of the car. Oh my, so this is what I'm going to say, blah, blah, and so you already begin to build in your head your script, what you're going to say. And then if you come home and I don't start off saying the whole thing, all of that goes right up. You're like, oh, shoot. But the point is that you can do that because you have acquired a language. And I can because I've also acquired a language. The frustrating thing and the challenging thing is that there's a two-way degree of travesty that's happening in our field. Most of the deaf kiddos whom we are blessed to work with are not, they haven't acquired a language. They're learning a language, which is
Mhm.
a very, very different process.
Mhm.
They're learning a language
Mhm.
also at a later age. They're learning a language in a setting that's not typical. So school classrooms are not like home settings. They're school settings. So
Yeah.
you have education ease that happens. Why we're talking about things in schools is very different than when we chat at home. So I'm blessed to have two boys. My oldest son is now in college. How the heck did that happen? My younger son is a senior in high school.
Uh-huh.
But there are times that we just come in and, there's a lot of here at home, we help to fill in gaps still.
Right. Right.
This happened, Papa, I mind Papa, this happened today. What do I say? What do I do? Well, who are you talking to? Give me the setting again. So everything happens so you'll go back to this diagram. Tell me where you were at, who you were talking with. What do you think was supposed to happen there? And
Mhm.
then I can better help you to understand how to really build your discourse.
And it's true
So
when
what we know,
interpreters,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
sorry, I just wanted to add, when interpreters come into the evaluation, the EIPA, if they're trying to process in that bottom up manner, they're thinking lexical, word, 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 then really the success rate's not there. They're not going to be able to get an advanced level. They'll be able to express the lexical to a degree, but that advanced level, those 4.0s, they're going to remain elusive because it's the top-down processing that allows us to really present the information with accuracy, right?
Exactly right.
Mhm.
And what we now know is you have to have a significant vocabulary and not to have enough what I call cognitive horsepower to think in a pragmatic sense.
Right.
So if I'm still trying to think about what's the sign for social, what's the sign for equality, what's the sign for judicial, I'm thinking at the lexical level. And of course, all of us have those hits, and I can tell you with my stroke, I still sometimes, but here's what happens to me. I'll be talking along and then I do this because I have to go into word retrieval mode.
Ah, yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, okay, wait a minute. Okay, and so I literally have to break off. So in a very weird way, my stroke has kind of helped me to better understand what happens in lexical retrieval in our head.
Interesting.
So you're spot on. What happens until we are pretty balanced bilinguals is that we find people working backwards.
Right.
So
Right.
what's happening is the most important signal is it's gone. There isn't any meta framing at all.
Mhm, mhm.
At best, there may be what I notice in the skills that kick on, at best, there may be some affect that kicks in. But things like grammar, things like stress, things like boundaries, those all go bye-bye because I'm thinking down here, and this is where the model gets, I'll warn your audience, this is where the model gets a little dangerous.
Mhm, mhm.
This is what ends up happening. I'm at the lexical level, and kids are just getting what I call word salad.
Right. Right. It's
And there
not
are still, and not to, there are still, the thing that really makes me feel better today is that the quality of educational interpreters that we're seeing today compared to when we first rolled this sucker out, miles, miles
dramatic.
different. I'm so pleased that people are taking this very seriously because
I was reading a discussion group recently online. It's an NAIE discussion group, and they were talking about should we call ourselves educational interpreters or are we simply interpreters? And the support for no, we're educational interpreters. That matters. We're specialists in our field, right? I thought was a very excellent discussion that may not have happened 15, 20 years ago, because at the time we're like, oh yeah, I'm in education, which means I can't cut it in the community interpreting. And that was the thinking at that time, but things have changed. And the quality of educational interpreters, like you said, is just phenomenally better now.
Well, and I know, I know it, I don't know so much what AFLIC's view was this, but I definitely know RID for a long time was like, had this much like, if you are doing educational interpreting, you are oppressing deaf children.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, for a huge segment of our history, they were like closet interpreters.
Right.
Where do you work? I work in the public schools,
Right.
Don't tell anybody that, because I'm really not oppressing this kid. They're doing really well.
Yeah.
And I have, I evaluate with incredible people. One of the raters that I work with frequently, excuse me, was educated in a public school setting. And we've had that discussion about what if you had a deaf child, what would you do?
Mm-hmm.
Where would you educate your child? And she very explicitly said, I would have to be very comfortable that school for the deaf was providing an at grade level challenging education for my child. I think that that's really important for them to have other deaf kids around, but I don't want them getting a dummied down education. Now, that being said, it's easy to go, well, of course the mainstream then is better. That being said, I don't want my kid also to get a crappy interpreter.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because
it profoundly affects their
it
education.
profoundly affects their education. And once you get a notion into a kid's head, it is exponentially more difficult to get it out of their head.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So to extinguish a false concept, and I disagree with some cognitive science that say that it's easier to supplant those. I don't think so. I know that in not even in the interpreting realm, and you meet people that hold on to a theory. I mean, we just saw horrific stuff here in our government, where people with a theory or a supposed value went absolutely nuts, stormed our government headquarters. They weren't doing it just because, they were really doing it because they had a reason for it. Now, I look at them, I don't understand their reason, but I don't doubt the fact that they really had a reason. Their rationale caused the behavior that it did. Now, I can step back and go, I think there were better options. I think there are better options. I think we need to get to that. And so the whole thing here in the United States now is, how do we kind of pull back on all of this unrest that's happening in the political field and get back to being like respectful and setting up common goals and living in an era where there really isn't fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
we do live in very epic times, if you will. There's no doubt about it. The things that have gone on recently are quite different than ever before.
that is true. And I didn't mean to get off on that.
That's okay.
I tried.
That's all right.
Sorry
That's
about
all
that.
right. But I'm going to actually take the diagram down now for a minute.
Okay.
Let's see if I can get that. There we go. I really, really appreciate you talking with us about top-down processing. And I was hoping that you could share a little bit with us before we go today about discourse mapping, because really those are the two subjects that interpreters have so many questions about: discourse mapping and top-down processing. So could you just tell them, I know it's something that they could spend a couple of semesters in college focused on, but can you just tell them in a little bit, in a nutshell, a little bit about discourse mapping, because it seems to be a mystery for some of them.
I would be glad to, and thank you for asking. Discourse mapping is really the highest form, I think, of cognitive structuring. If you look at, let's take, and I've used this example before, and if we took Harry Potter, one of the Harry Potter books, here's the Harry Potter book.
Right.
And if I could somehow take that book and magically make all of the commas and the periods disappear
Uh-huh.
and all the chapter breaks, and I gave it to you, would you still not have the Harry Potter novel?
It would be very confusing.
But would you still not have the Harry Potter
Yeah,
novel?
you would still
Yeah,
have it for sure. Yes.
definitely. So things like grammar are commas and periods, right? So then I begin to subdivide by thought and cohesion and theme. Then I think about paragraph structure, where we have unity of theme and goals. Da, 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 da. All right. And then we stack those paragraphs out, if you will. Discourse mapping for me is kind of the highest level of organization where, you know, if you open up some of those novels, there's like at the beginning of a chapter, there's like a cover page where it talks about, you know, the dawning or whatever that might be. So discourse mapping for me is like, it's the marker that helps me to discern, here's the main theme.
Right.
So when I think about a discourse map, stop and think about, you know, you're driving somewhere and somebody says, okay, so you go down to the 7-Eleven, and at the 7-Eleven, you're going to hang a right. All right. At the third stoplight, you're going to turn left. So the marker becomes 7-Eleven, check, right, 1, 2, 3, turn. So in this whole notion of discourse mapping, while I'm interpreting, I need to put in some type of a broad signal, just like the turn signal on my car. So frequently, and when I'm watching skilled us do that kind of work, it's like, you know, and I'm just going to shift into, imagine that I'm interpreting something. And so it could be like, I may actually go back and back reference it and then link it in, even if the teacher didn't do it, because I'm building a cognitive map. And this is where we get into like the hairy grounds of, well, the teacher didn't say it, so you should. I don't care. I don't care if the teacher didn't say it.
It's a visual
The kid's
language.
not getting direct instruction. They're getting an interpreted education. Chain the freaking thing together for them.
Yep.
That's discourse mapping. And I might go all the way back to, remember, blah, 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 that. So I'm actively thinking way over, and I'm looking at the model like from up here. Because I know here, what I know is going to happen here is this freaky, icky word that we call, the kid has to apply. There's going to be a test. There's going to be a measure. And the end test is called life.
Right. Right.
If I don't transfer these skills out of school to my everyday experience, what's the point? So there, in a nutshell, is this notion of discourse mapping, but it means I have to have a heck of a lot of horsepower. I'm not thinking about verb agreement. I'm not thinking about classifier predicates. I'm not thinking about all that blah, 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 blah. That's all way down the pike. And if I'm not a balanced bilingual, and if I'm not fairly smart, I'm probably not going to get a very high score in the area of discourse mapping.
Right.
And I don't mean that in a cruel sense.
No.
But it's really where the rubber hits the road.
Discourse mapping is really a higher level of having all of the skills, all of those basic skills. So in order to really be hearing the information from the teacher and really in your mind creating what the teacher's talking about and having a deep understanding of it and then presenting it accurately visually, I mean, that's something that encompasses so many of the skills. So until those other more basic skills, how you're using your space, how you're using your classifier, how you're using all of these other skills are fully developed, then you can work on discourse mapping and continue to grow in that. It's not something, because sometimes interpreters will come to me and say, oh, I scored so low on discourse mapping, I want to focus on that. Well, really, it's focusing on the other skills and developing them, with discourse mapping be something that will grow naturally as you improve all those other skills.
And yes, the other skills give you the horsepower, if you will, to
Mhm.
have the ability to think in a more meta. It's a metacognitive task. I'm thinking over and above my own thinking. I'm thinking over and above the thinking of the educator I'm working with, and I'm thinking over and above the thinking of the kid. So I'm thinking more about everybody else's thinking than I'm thinking about what I am actually interpreting. And you and I
Exactly.
both know that all of a sudden you'll, like in a classroom setting, you'll be going along and you look at the kids and go, lights on, stereo's running, but no one's home. I can't, and all of a sudden you have to, and typically what we do, you go backwards in their cognition. You go, remember this, and you pray, they go, yes, yes, yes. Boom. So what you've just done is a cognitive map. You've done a discourse map where you've gone to their head to where that notion lies, and you pull that information into the area that they can begin thinking about it. And if you don't do that, you're not interpreting. And
Mhm.
if I don't tell the teacher what I've just done, that's another important thing. I have to be able to articulate what their deaf student has or does not have when they come to the table of learning.
Mhm. They're an important part of the team, the educational team. There's no doubt about it. The interpreter's an integral part of that.
Yep,
So,
without a doubt.
well, this has been absolutely a fascinating discussion. I really, really appreciate you taking the time. And I hope that things go well with your plans. We're looking forward to your book coming out one of these days. And I know it's a bit of a project because you probably haven't started, but we're looking forward to it and all the other endeavors you have in mind. So
Well, to everybody that's watching this, I apologize to the cacophony of animals running around in our home. But, I just want to wish everybody the best and tell you how very grateful I am for your contributions to humanity. That, it's very easy to not to contribute and not to care and to just become very selfish. And we're seeing a lot of that today. So thank you. And thank you for spending the time. And thank you for trying and trying and trying to improve your skills, because with that effort, it'll happen. It really will.
thank you so much.
Thank
All
you.
right. Bye-bye.
Take care. Happy New Year.
Thank you.